severe competition is going to start in very many ways. Maybe that calls for a different seminar on that. So this is going to be the global impact. Finally, about India. What is India's dilemma? Now, once the ground realities have changed in Afghanistan, some Indians thought should we talk about only in cooperation, or India should be very realistic about the ground situation and take an appropriate step. This was number one. Number two, India never ever, liked the Taliban during the last 20 years, not 20 years, 30 years, from 96, for obvious reasons. A Pakistani creation, a destabilizing force. When Obama good Taliban and the Taliban are very violent behavior like them, even content bad Taliban, it was Delhi, which very loudly announced there is nothing called good Taliban or bad Taliban, right? So now the situation is the Taliban is in control in Kabul. So what should India do? Should talk to Taliban? Should not talk to Taliban? And the Indian dilemma became more acute when we found that it is not just Pakistan talking to the Taliban. It is the Americans who legitimized them first by talking to them in Doha. Even Moscow invited them for a dialogue. Then Beijing also invited them for a dialogue. So if the Chinese and the Pakistanis and the Russians and the Americans all are talking to them, and why were they talking to them anyway? All these four countries had different interests. Should India talk to them in more dialogue with Taliban? Right? How can we talk to Taliban? Right? For the human rights record, the record on respecting women's rights, and the records on violence, the records of their behavior and attitude towards the minorities in Afghanistan. How can you talk to Taliban like that? There are other people. Another group said, no harm in talking to Taliban. I am one among those. I argued not once, many times, that talking to Taliban does not mean that we are recognizing Taliban. Talking to Taliban does not mean that we are going to compromise our interest. Talking to Taliban is important because otherwise our role will be zero there. That is why we should talk to them. Then I argued, what should we talk about? Number one, at least the Taliban fellows from their side have openly made statements that India's developmental activities in Afghanistan has been a welcome development. They respect it, and those unfinished projects should be completed. The initiative came from their side. Was there any harm in talking to them how best to protect India's interest? Or it was harmless? Number two, Afghanistan is such a country that is just behind Pakistan. And Pakistan, everybody knows Pakistan has a policy of maintaining strategic depth. That is, they can go behind. There is a fallback position and all. Now, by not talking to the most powerful entity in Kabul, in a way, we are giving a complete, free field to the Pakistanis and go and do whatever they want. Would it not be advisable to not completely antagonize directly the Taliban so that the Pakistanis and the Sunnis have a full ball game there? That was my argument. Right. In any case, there were reports about some Indian envoys talking to the Taliban in Doha. The MES said, no, we did not talk to them. The Qatari foreign minister makes a statement saying that, yes, Indians talked to them. And even a journalist who talked to some Taliban fellows, and the Taliban fellows said, yes, they talked to them. And later, of course, more recently, even our ambassador talked to them in Doha. talking is not recognizing. Talking is not even maintaining the kind of relations we have with the previous government, right? So in a way, the good sign is at least there are some back channel discussion, and that should continue. Now, what is government of India doing? I don't think there is any dilemma. I think the Modi government is doing a fantastic job in addressing the issue in Afghanistan. And I'll tell you what the government is doing. Now, Taliban thinks that they can run the show without the help of the international community. Now they are realizing very fast, without foreign assistance, they cannot run the country. It's easy to become an insurgent and start a guerrilla warfare. It is not easy to run the government unless you have legitimate money. It's easy to run an insurgency with the help of drug money that you get. It's not easy to run the government unless you have revenues for your annual budget. So India is not. India is watching. India's interest is not to allow this Taliban government, which is not broad-based, which is full of, the cabinet has members who are in the terror list of United Nations and even the American terror list and all. And Mr. Haqqani is the interior minister. It is horrible, right? So India is watching. Resistance has started within Afghanistan. India has gone to the United Nations and resolutions have been passed. The Taliban must abide by whatever it has promised to start with. And we are doing everything possible diplomatically to ensure that the Taliban of the kind that we are seeing today, which has gone back on its promises, and you saw the news about 3-4 guys who were hanged because they were kidnappers and all. So they're going to their old ways. International community should find its own interest, not to allow a Taliban of this kind. Pakistan initially thought that by sending the ISI chief, it can easily form a government, because the Doha group and this Haqqani group, they don't get along. And it was the Pakistani ISI chief who managed that Mr. Baradar, who was actually the main negotiator in Doha, should not be the prime minister. And they managed that. But now Pakistan has realized it's not easy. So Pakistan has made an appeal to the international community to cooperate with the Taliban government, an appeal, right? So right now, Government of India has done whatever is necessary diplomatically. At one time, when the American spy chief, the British spy chief, the Russian spy chief, all were there in Delhi, that shows how proactive we are to ensure that the Taliban government should not be able to run the show unless they make the government broad-based and abide by their own promises made at Doha. Militarily, Government of India is doing a lot of things in terms of developing a force that can tackle a new kind of terrorism that we are expecting. We are ready to fight. If the Taliban and the Pakistan together, they want to do something in Kashmir, other parts of India, the government has woken up. The government is taking all necessary steps to ensure that their sinister designs don't work. That also we are doing. So I will not say this is a dilemma anymore. It's a very clear-cut policy. Very, very clear-cut policy. Talk to them, to persuade them, to do the right things. Don't recognize them. Build your defense forces and engage the international community. I gave a lot of kudos to the government and the foreign ministry, particularly the foreign minister, under the guidance of the prime minister, to do whatever is required to meet a potential challenge that is going to come from Afghanistan. So I have many stories to tell, but the time is limited. So I thought I've answered my last question. There are so many distinguished people here. Somebody from Kyrgyzstan, somebody from Goa, somebody from Nepal, somebody from Delhi. So I'm sure after this webinar, all of us will get, less confused, more clear about the conundrum and the dilemma. Thank you very much. And I again thank Professor Tripathi for giving me this opportunity. Professor Tripathi, the kind of disruption we saw just now, it happens in many places, including in my university. At one time, I was talking to 6 European diplomats. And I was the acting VC that day because the VC had gone to some other place. And there was a knock on the door and shouting slogans and all that. I'll request to the student community and even others that protest is okay, opposing policy is okay, but academic activities must continue. It is in the best interest of the students, the faculty, and the country. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. And I know that I'm part of this webinar, and I thank you for your patient listening, and namaskar to all of you.
Thank you, Professor Mahapatra. It was so much enlightening speech. I cannot exactly conclude. The reason is it was transparent to us, quite clear that what is the position of India and how India should behave in the present context. So we are very much thankful to you. We are also grateful that you, a person like you, accepted our request to address this webinar. And I, on behalf of Fakir Mohan University, will request you something which I hope that you will not deny, because you are from my state, so we are proud of you. If we propose that we will have some understanding with your Kalinga Institute for Indo-Pacific Studies, perhaps both of us will enrich each other academically. Therefore, my request to you to please consider an agreement or understanding, whatever you like, that we will go together to grow together academically. I think this is on my behalf, on the behalf of Fakir Mohan University. I request you to accept it and we will work it out. Now I request our guest of honor, Professor Yunus, to speak on the occasion. So Yunus, please.
Okay, dear patrons, convener, planner, speakers, organizers, you hear me, right?
Yeah, it's sorry.
And participants of this international webinar, I'm delighted to be invited to this webinar and meet my Indian friends online. The small occasion what we had, that's normal for democratic countries. So I'm joining you from Bishkek, from the Kyrgyz-Turkish Manas University, where I have been working for the last 12 years. I'm originally from Turkey, Istanbul. Here at the university, I'm also the chairperson of the Central Asian Research Center. Actually, Professor Mahapatra clarified many issues related to the conundrum in Afghanistan and the position of India. Well, I will also briefly talk about the ramifications of the Taliban seizure of power in Afghanistan and try to pose some questions, just like he did, Professor Mahapatra did. Those questions are about what are the possible outcomes of this change of state. There are, of course, different scenarios, which we all know. Some are more optimistic, they sound like wishful thinking. Some are opportunistic, like China's position, and some draw a nightmare for the future of Afghanistan and the region. Well, I want to start with a book chapter I published in India in 2014. I was invited by the Mevlana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies in Kolkata to join a workshop on Afghanistan beyond 2014 at that time. Well, it was a time when NATO formally ended ISAF combat operations in Afghanistan and full security responsibility was transferred to the Afghan government, 7 years ago. There, I humbly underlined the importance of an Afghan-led solution with a regional support of a wide alliance. Well, of course, my argument was not an original idea. It was the common sense shared by many. And my argument was that the failure in Afghanistan was to the disadvantage of all states in the region. The secular Central Asian republic's stability was expected to be shaken by terrorist attacks of fighters returning to their homeland from Afghanistan. China's problem with separatists would be further enhanced from Xinjiang Uyghur region, I mean. Russia would try to fight extremism in Central Asia, and also Chechen fighters from Afghanistan would threaten Russia, while Iran could be concerned with the rise of anti-Shia extremism and Sunni Baluchis in its country. The power struggle in Pakistan also could change to favor extremism, while the rise of Islamic radicalism could also affect India, of course. In 2014, all were facing some threat, and the solution could only be achieved by participation of all states in the region. This was a win-win situation for all, including the Afghans, a broad cooperation. And not only to prevent the radicalization in Afghanistan, creating a powder cake, the regional cooperation could have been consolidated and prospered by the realization of the new Silk Road. Of course, I do not mention the one-sided Belt and Road Initiative, but an inter-regional connectivity with active role and initiative of all regional countries, intertwined by roads, media, internet, cultural and scientific exchange, a network for the transport of goods, oil, gas, and electricity. So Afghanistan could economically benefit from a rising regional cooperation. Economic revenues could have been created through, the projects like TAPI, Central Asia Chabar Route, Kaza 1000, and other projects. This was for the benefit of all countries in the region. But a wide regional cooperation and economic development of Afghanistan could not be achieved in the long 20 years we left behind. Well, what went wrong? Yes, as Professor put it, that's a question for historians to be told later. But still, what we have seen is that there was no sustainable state, no national identity, a poor education, poor health system, poor government, corruption. Well, we have a long list. The main focus was on the military, which was understandable, it was normal, but even the military of Afghanistan was not ready to fight against the Taliban. There was no regional cooperation. India was among the few supporting Afghanistan, and India was the largest regional provider of aid for Afghanistan, and the third internationally. India provided with infrastructural and social projects, including construction of roads, new buildings, the parliament building, including power plant, assistant rural development, train Afghan civil servants, police, etc. India was also assisting education and health sectors, of course, and not to forget, Indian embassy was bombed twice because of their assistance to Afghanistan in 2008 and 2009. While other Indian premises were also repeatedly attacked. But still, India continued its help assistance to Afghanistan with, as Professor Mahapatra mentioned, with over 500 projects. But as I was saying, India was not well supported by other regional powers or neighboring countries, which were mainly dealing with their own problems rather than assisting to the consolidation of the Republic of Afghanistan. The US and also India helped to the formation of an Afghan government, security forces, army to remain in power after the total evacuation of the US troops. But as we have witnessed, the collapse of the republic was very quick, beyond expectations. And this time, different than in 1997, the Taliban has the total control in all Afghanistan. It may not be a control in deep. We are not sure about the resistance groups, how will they react, or the warlords, how will they react in time? But at least on the map, we see a broader control than it was 20 years ago. So what are the possible outcomes now? The Taliban states that they have changed. Is it reliable? Well, the same ruling cadres as 20 years ago are again in the government. Did they change? Many do not believe that. Some only argue that we should give them a chance to prove themselves, or that we should thrust out our hand so they can learn to compromise to reach a consensus with the world. They also say that an isolated Afghanistan is more dangerous than an Afghanistan in cooperation. The Taliban, however, shows that they did not change much. They started with the application of the so-called Islamic Sharia in crime and punishment by amputation and execution, and the women enjoy less freedom than they had in the Republic, but more freedom than in the former rule of Taliban. However, still, this seems to be temporal. As I said, the cadres are the same. Their social and educational background is also the same. Additionally, they have a local enemy, an alternative, ISKP, the Islamic State in the Khorasan province, which can grow if the Taliban makes compromises. So these are on the negative side. On the more optimistic side again, it is argued that they have to cooperate. Why? Because they have realized that the big powers will not let them rule if they do not cooperate. But back in 1997-2001, the US had no big problem with their rule in Afghanistan. From their perspective, the Taliban was even considered as a factor of stability which was necessary for regional cooperation, and which could create an alternative route to Central Asian countries to reach seaports and thus limiting Russian influence in Central Asia. Well, this did not happen. The Taliban hosted Al-Qaeda with its traditional hospitality, let's say. Indeed, that was okay by then for the world. And Islamic radicals could live peacefully in the Darul Islam of Afghanistan, House of Islam. But then the world witnessed 9/11. The Taliban became the chief supporter of Al-Qaeda, and this brought the end of the Taliban's emirate. I wanted to remind that because the Western powers will not show great enthusiasm to interfere in Afghanistan if there won't be a direct threat to them. They will definitely keep condemning Afghanistan for its human rights records, and most countries will most probably not recognize the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan officially, but they will not try to change the regime again. How about the other countries? Well, China and Pakistan seem to be the biggest winners for now. Pakistan has regained a sphere of influence, vital for its strategic depth. China added Afghanistan to its network of roads. Well, actually, the Taliban poses a threat for China as there are Uyghur fighters in Afghanistan. They are hardened by years of warfare in Afghanistan, and now they are ready to infiltrate into Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China to continue their jihad in their homeland. China, however, chose to shake hands with the Taliban to keep Uyghur Mujahideen in Afghanistan in exchange of economic and infrastructural assistance, which is very much needed by the Taliban. China will both benefit from the increase of its influence in the region and prevent terrorist attacks. So that's the plan of China. We'll see what will happen. There is also a potential threat for Pakistan, actually, caused by the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan. What will happen? Well, for Pakistan, it is said that Taliban of Afghanistan was good. Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan was bad. But what will happen now? TTP will definitely be supported by some groups, at least, in Afghanistan. Russian position, well, it always prioritizes security. If Islamic radicalism won't threaten Russia directly or through Central Asia, then Afghanistan is not a matter of interest for Russia. Additionally, the US had left the region. That's also a gain for Russia. But how about Chechen foreign fighters under the Taliban? Will they go back to Russia? Is the Taliban in a position to control them? Those are questions. It's similar for Central Asian countries. If Afghanistan will control jihadist elements in its country, it's fine with them too. Russia will continue helping Central Asian countries against infiltrations of Islamic militants, and this can only be organized by the Collective Security Treaty Organization of Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Belarus, and Armenia. So that also increases the role in Central Asia. So that's another strengthening. So Russia is also looks like from among the winners of this new situation. About the potential threat for Central Asia, what is the potential threat for Central Asia? Well, briefly, for Uzbekistan and for the countries who are sharing the Fergana Valley, the threat is related with the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, which has a plan to fight in the Fergana Valley, and that's a threat for the Uzbekistan, of course, Tajikistan, and also Kyrgyzstan. We do not have correct data about the recent situation of Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. Most of their leaders have been killed during American operations when they were fighting together with Taliban or Al-Qaeda. And there are reports that made local marriages with the people and they become but still, there is a big threat that they can act Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. Speaking about Tajikistan, there is another threat related with the under the Taliban, and a few days ago, to Tajikistan, but it was rejected by Tajik officials. Tajik officials are trying to talk with Taliban and prevent this threat. The same can be said about Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan also chose to establish contacts with Afghanistan, and last week a Kyrgyz official, head of Security Council, visited Kabul bringing humanitarian aid. And he had talks with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. This made Kyrgyzstan the first country to pay an official visit to the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. On the other hand, they did not accepted as a terrorist organization in Kyrgyzstan. For Kyrgyzstan, the problem is more related with the Tabligh Jemaat, which is very strong in Kyrgyzstan. Well, let's say strong in Kyrgyzstan. And in recent years, some of its members have been politicized, whereas some others are strongly against politicization. Whether this can be a breeding ground for the members of Taliban or another extremist group is a question we should follow. So, the optimism again. There's another optimism about a moderate Taliban, possibility of a moderate Taliban, because it lacks skilled personnel to rule a country. The Islamic education is very strict and purist, not even any place for education about raising economists, technicians, specialists, engineers, doctors, etc. In order to rule a country, they are obliged to integrate the new generation of the educated Afghans who were mainly raised in the last 20 years under the Republic. Furthermore, they are also a generation open to the world through the use of internet. the Taliban might be the same, but Afghanistan is not the country as it was 20 years ago. Will they resist the strict methods of the Taliban? And if so, how? Well, that's another question. The Taliban is also in need of foreign direct investment. The funds allocated by the IMF to Afghanistan, which is around $450 million, have been suspended. Only China is willing to invest in Afghanistan, but is it enough? Well, and this one-sided relationship will be very demanding, affecting the independence of Afghanistan. What will the Taliban do in an internationally hostile atmosphere in the absence of investors, skilled cadres, anything to build a modern state except arms? It's a big question. Will the command of Taliban be successful in controlling other groups and foreign fighters in its ranks who might be willing to spread jihad to other countries? How will the modernized Afghans react to Taliban's rule? What are the limits of the international community for not interfering in Afghanistan? The role of India is also related with these questions, and Afghanistan, well, is a lost ground for now. The Afghans, however, were positive about the role of India in Afghanistan, according to polls. Around 50% of Afghans were positive about the Indian presence. So this will remain thanks to the soft power role of India. Should India establish connections with the new government to balance Pakistani and Chinese influence in Afghanistan, which will help Afghanistan to increase its independence? Or should India wait for the fall of the new government, inefficient to rule a country and isolated in a hostile international arena? Well, I do not consider myself in a position to give answers to these questions about the role of India. Our esteemed speakers here will give more valuable answers than me about these questions I have mentioned here. So I close it here. Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Yunus. It's quite a deep analysis you presented here, where you covered all neighboring countries and their approach towards Taliban, the new government in Afghanistan. You presented the facts, how we are affected by the present government, and if this fundamentalist government is allowed to continue, what will be the repercussions, what will be the international situation. Everything you narrated so candidly that I am really delighted by your speech. The participants must be taking a lot out of it regarding this Taliban and Indian dilemma. Again, I have a request for you, Professor Yunus, that we again are interested to go. We are a very small university, I should say, in eastern part of India. And as a university, I may request you that your Turkish Manas University, if explores the possibility of an understanding with ours, at least we can be benefited out of that understanding. So therefore, before extending the formal request to you, I request you that you should consider this, and we'll go together in these academic activities. So I think my request will not be turned down, rather it will be accepted at your end. Thank you very much for your speech, for your presence here. Thank you. I think I should speak few words. As I told everybody that I am not an expert in international relations nor a diplomat. So my knowledge is very limited to newspapers as well as to different papers I read. Few questions are there in my mind on this issue. So I consider that I do not know. I have not entered into deep without entering into the deep of the consequences, expected consequences. I interacted with an Afghan student in Utkal University on August 17th who was staying there. So I asked him, what is your plan of action? When this is going on in your country, what is your plan of action? What about your parents? What about your own situation in your country? He said that he was not able to connect with the parents and he was worried about parents. Simultaneously, he has no agenda to go back to Afghanistan. There was a confusion. Then where he will be, whether he will be accepted in India or after his study, he will be sent back as it is. Still, though there is something, Doldrum is continuing in Afghanistan, still he will be sent back. It's a confusion in the mind of a young person from Afghanistan. Similar situation exists everywhere throughout the world, I think. Everybody is observing. And to me, India should not be overshadowed by US, not to be too much dependent on it for having a stand on Taliban. We see the role of Pakistan after Taliban conquered Kabul, especially America withdrew itself and trying to bring an understanding between Haqqani network and Taliban. And finally, Pakistan is leaving no stone unturned to blame America, to be with Taliban, and to develop its own system to have Taliban as an ally to it. On the other hand, China has also extended its support to Taliban. Moving a step forward, it has declared placing financial assistance to Afghanistan and also appeals the international community to provide financial assistance. India could not imagine such a situation before Taliban took over, and therefore it has remained either silent or passive. And here is the dilemma. The other dilemma is the support to Taliban by Pakistan, China, Turkey, and indirectly Russia to some extent. This may encourage ISIS and Al Qaeda activities to grow with their illegal, anti-democratic, violent activities in South Asia. That's a question. Neither America nor India directly blames any country. That creates more confusion. The stand of US not to blame Pakistan or any other country creates further dilemma. Perhaps US doesn't want to be with India to directly blame Pakistan. That's my own observation. On the other hand, India itself is not prepared to be open on this issue. This may be due to the investments done in Pakistan and or the fear of losing the neighbor, or to take a non-aligned stand. This is reflected in the speech of our Honorable Prime Minister in the General Assembly of UN. Though we face the problem of sponsored terrorism for last 7 decades, even the neighbor uses the military for creating instability in our country, be it Mumbai terror attacks or Kargil. Every day we lost lives because of such activities. We are not so vocal as expected. Though it is told again and again that democracy will not exist if terrorism is promoted by any country allowing its own soil to be used. Some countries never take any step to curb terrorism. Being out of control, the situation is fundamentalist in the name of religion and using religious dictums try to destroy democracy, and ultimately human rights are affected. India always moves towards promoting and taking care of fundamental rights of its citizens. If one pillar of democracy let us say, executive, more influenced by politics, goes away from it, the other pillar, judiciary, takes care of it. So we survive as a democracy, as a better democracy. The disturbances in neighborhood are deliberate attempts to destroy our system of delivers our system of unity in diversity and unified growth in spite of differentials in the system. If the dilemma continues, like because Pakistan and China support Taliban, we cannot, or we will be nowhere. Of course, straight blames may not help us, rather may lead towards diplomatic failure, but exposing the heinous roles with evidences before international agencies and getting support from others for combating terrorism is most essential. It may be uprooting terrorism from our neighboring countries or convincing the negative on the results of it to them is important. Our big brother's role must be felt by others. Sharpening our diplomacy, empowering our neighbors, continuing earning their confidence, acting responsibly towards development of the neighbors may help removing the dilemma. We need to deal with the insurgent group of Afghanistan or going away from it is another dilemma for us. The poorly managed withdrawal strategy of US has forced us to look into the matter seriously. Taliban smoothly took over Kabul. President Ghani fled the country. Ghani had declared India as a friend of his country. But now, where are we? The assurance given by Taliban before its win to protect women's rights, to protect press freedom, and preventing Afghan soil from being used by terrorists are now seem to be reversed. Taliban's pressure has become strategic issues for Russia and China. Taliban's presence itself has become strategic issues for Russia and China. China wants to save its territory, especially Xinjiang, from terrorists, whereas Russia accepts it as a better alternative than no alternative after America's withdrawal from Taliban. This dilemma is added by Pakistan, which directly involves itself to help Taliban conquer all Afghan, including Panjshir. India faces the uncertainty and policy dilemma whether to oppose or support to continue its investments and influence the country. India's approach to strategically reach Taliban with extending development support through investments will work. But can we go with anti-democratic forces that has no respect for human rights? That is another question with us. However, for me, we should strategically develop the relationship with the present government, that is Taliban government. And it's always wise to be with them so that we are also strategic partners in development of Afghanistan. As we know, one cannot grow alone if neighbors do not grow. One cannot develop alone. If we should look into the developmental aspects of Afghanistan on the whole, our investments should continue. We should establish strategic relationship with the present government so that our influence will continue and the role of India will be felt in the country. They may realize that India is a friend, not an enemy. With these words, I thank you all for hearing me. Thank you very much. Now I request Professor Munesh Chandra Adhikari, our Chairman PG Council, to speak few words. Professor Adhikari, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Honorable Vice Chancellor and President of today's webinar, Professor Santosh Kumar Tripathi sir, today's chief speaker, Professor Chintamani Mohapatra sir, and guest of honor, Professor Yunus Amri Kurbuch, and Head of the Department of Social Science, Dr. Sunil Kumar Padi, Convener, Dr. Ramakrishna Pradhan, and dear Professor Anil Mohapatra, and all the members of organizing committee and dear participant students. Today on Bharat Bandh, already we have started our current issue based webinar organized by PG Department of Social Science on the topic that is even Conundrum India's Afghan dilemma at FM University. And we could able to get the opportunity to listen a number of things, facts, causes, solution from two great persons like our chief guest and chief speaker and guest of honor. And regarding the issue, I can say a few words that what I never recalls that the intention of Taliban has never been good issues are there. Now the question comes whether the history is going to repeat or not. And to get the answer, by this time we have already got some ideas, and the rest research person will help our students and researchers to have some solution or any concept regarding this. And besides the topic issues, being the chairman of PG Council, let me speak something about our Fakir Mohan University. That this university was established in 1999, is approved and recognized by Odisha state government as well as UGC New Delhi. This university has been accredited by the Association of Indian Universities, New Delhi, and also a member of Association of Commonwealth University, UK. NAC under UGC has also accredited FM University with B+ grade 16. By the leadership of our Vice Chancellor, all the PG departments are advised to organize as many number of webinars, workshops, plus add-on courses so as to enhance the quality of our university. And on this occasion, finally, I am thankful to the organizers for conducting this type of international webinar, and also thankful to all the research persons and our President, Vice Chancellor for their presence with us and advices, suggestions. Thank you all, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Adhikari. Now we are to the concluding. We are to conclude our inaugural session. I request Dr. Rajashree Dutt to offer the thanks to the dignitaries. Dr. Dutt, please.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Santosh Kumar Tripathi, sir. Respected Chairman, Postgraduate Council, Professor Munesh Chandra Adhikari, sir. Respected Chief Speaker of the webinar, Professor Chidamani Mehta. Respected Guest of Honor, Professor Yunus Emri Gurbas, sir. Respected other dignitaries who has joined us. Respected Head Department of Social Science, Dr. Sunil Kumar Padi, sir. Respected Professor Anil Kumar Mahapatra, sir. Esteemed convener of this webinar, Dr. Ramakrishna Pradhan, sir. Esteemed colleagues of social science and other departments of the university. Dear research scholars, students and participants, a very good afternoon to all. I am Dr. Rajashree Datta, and it gives me immense pleasure to offer a formal vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of Social Science. We have come to an end of the inaugural session of this international webinar on Taliban Conundrum, India's Afghan dilemma. To begin with, it is not a matter of trust. It's going to be all about the actions, not the words. The topic will keep us busy for a very long time. I would like to express my deep sense of gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor Santosh Kumar Tripathi, for his constant encouragement and support for organizing this international webinar. Thank you, sir. I express my thanks to Chairman Postgraduate Council, Professor Munesh Chandra Adhikari, sir, for his guidance and advices. My thanks and appreciation goes to Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, sir, Pro Vice Chancellor JNU. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation, taking out time from your busy schedule, and providing us an in-depth knowledge about the topic. Thank you, sir. My deepest gratitude goes to Professor Yunus Emre Gurbaz, sir, from Turkish Manas University, Kyrgyzstan, for enlightening us with your views and deliberations. I express my thanks to Professor Anil Kumar Mahapatra, sir, Professor of Political Science, Department of Social Science, Fakir Mohan University, for introducing our guest to the gathering. I express my gratitude to our head Department of Social Science, Dr. Sunil Kumar Padi, sir, for being the backbone of this webinar. I thank the convener of this webinar, Dr. Ramkrishna Pradhan, sir, without whose vision organizing this webinar would not have been possible. I thank all my esteemed colleagues for their support and participation. I must also thank Manoj, Vijay, and all other research scholars, students, and participants for their active participation and patient hearing. Thank you, one and all, and we hope to have such academic interactions in future. I would request all the participants to stay connected because we'll shortly begin our plenary session, and the moderator of this session is Professor Anil Kumar Mahapatra. I request sir to please take over the session.
So before Professor Mahapatra takes over, I thank Dr. Jajati Patnaik, Associate Professor of JNU, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal from Director NIC Nepal, Dr. Javed Awar, Afghanistan, and Dr. Rudra Prasad Pradhan from Beats Pilani, Goa. They have joined. That's very good news for us, and we are really thankful to you, the learned panelists. And I hope the panel discussion will be more enriching in this webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Mahapatra. Thank you, Professor Yunus and others. Thank you very much. Let us conclude this session to move ahead with the technical session. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I, Professor Anil Kumar Mahapatra, welcome you all to this star-studded plenary session. The situation in Afghanistan reminds me of a Shakespearean quote: "The hell is empty, and the members of the hell are here." But taking cue from the keynote speaker, Professor Mahapatra, who was discussing conundrum, about the conundrum, that conundrum continues in Afghanistan as the solution eludes. The state is losing its grip over the people after all the efforts for state building held in the state that started with the removal of the same Taliban in 2001. So to discuss it further, I have with me 4 eminent speakers. All will be given 13 minutes each, and a gentle reminder would follow to conclude within the next minute. And the last 15 minutes will be devoted to taking questions from the audience and discussions. And I understand that the audience are listening to us. They are contributing to the success of this webinar. Therefore, we would open the floor to the audience after the speakers, all the speakers speak their ideas. Let me now first have Dr. Jajati Patnaik. Before I invite him to speak, let me introduce Dr. Patnaik. He's an associate professor at the Center for West Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU, New Delhi. He's a member of the editorial board of International Studies Journal from the SAGE Publication House. He has been acting as a referee for nationally and internationally acclaimed journals such as Economic and Political Weekly, the journals published by Routledge, Taylor and Francis Group. He has been widely cited by many various reputed journals, including Oxford University Press. He has, to his credit, articles in edited books, journals, magazines, weeklies, and dailies at the national and international level. He also has presented a large number of papers at the national and international conferences and delivered lectures at several academic institutions. Dr. Patnaik has been conferred Outstanding Teacher Award by the Governor of Arunachal Pradesh for his substantial contribution to the promotion of higher education and research in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. Dr. Patnaik, the floor is yours for the next 13 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mahapatta. I'm really privileged to speak at the Fakir Mohan University on Taliban Conundrum. Since the paucity of time, I think the lecture is only reduced to 13 minutes. So within the brief time, I would like to divide my lecture into some quick bullet points in terms of its ideology, funding, geopolitical implications, and India's response towards the conundrum. As you know that the ideology of Taliban, I would like to briefly highlight that is based on Salafism, Wahhabism, and Jihadism. And the sources of law, like Quran, Sunnah, and Hadith, actually the Taliban, therefore, and the doors of Ijtihad are completely closed. So in the context of this ideological sense, the reasoning is absolutely dropped in case of the interpretation of the law. Moreover, Taliban's religious bigotry is quite known and outrageous. As you know, that is how it destroyed the 6th century monumental Bahman Buddha statues in central Afghanistan. This and host of distasteful articles of Taliban have given it a bad name beyond repair. And in case of its regional implications, coming to Pakistan, I think Pakistan is its own victim because Tehrik-e-Taliban is working against Pakistan state and army. In case of Greater Pashtun land, Pakistan may be splitting into many states in the region. And its implications on China. China is spreading its hegemonic doctrine through BRI, that is Belt and Road Initiative, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, then MSR stands for Maritime Silk Road Corridor, and China is trying to do it through the Wakhan Corridor. The main objective of China is to exploit the raw materials and rare earth materials only to build up its gigantic IT industry at the cost of the inclusive development of the people. But there's a possibility that the Taliban may join with ETIM, that is East Turkestan Islamic Movement, to fan the trouble in the Uyghur region, particularly in the Xinjiang province of China. If you look at the geopolitical implications, there is Iran. US leaving its doorstep is definitely a feel-good factor for Iran, and it may expect Washington to move away from neighboring Iraq to make the path clear for its rise. But the Sunni-Shia sectarian conflict is a major hurdle that stands on the path of Iran's aspirations. The Hazara community of Afghanistan, which practices Shia Islam, constitutes around 10% of the entire population, has experienced severe persecution under Taliban from 1996 to 2001. and their story of suffering is extremely grim. Such conflicts will have direct bearing upon Iran and its regional geopolitical ambition. Coming to Russia, it is pertinent to mention here that Chechen insurgency involving into Caucasian Emirate in 2007 has been a problem for Russia. Caucasus Emirate premised on Sharia law, encompassing various republics in northern Caucasus like Chechens, Ingusetians, Kabylians, Bulgarians, Karachians, and its guerrilla operation against the Sarasa has made Kremlin very insecure. The rise of Taliban and Sunni connection may trigger the weakened Chechnya and others to fight for the Caucasus Republic. The pan-Islamic confederacy, if formed, may pose a greater challenge to the Russian aspirations in Central Asia as well. Moreover, Taliban, along with the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan and other Islamic groups, may spread radicalism in the region, leading to possible spillover effect among the Sunni majority countries of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan in Central Asia. Then coming to Turkey, you know that President Erdogan's ambition of new Ottomanism may take him closer to Afghan theater and may present him as a potential force capable of competition, rival, and domination. Pull out from Afghanistan and the mess that the Taliban have done provide the right opportunity for Turkey to expand its work in progress projects, the new Ottoman team. On the other, this collaboration may lead to conflict in the long run as both aspire to emerge as singular powers in Afghanistan. Besides this, Turkey is already grappling with the refugee crisis, hosting around 5 million Syrian refugees. If the Afghan conundrum festers for a longer period, Ankara may have to face the brunt of Afghan refugees. Coming to India, amid these complex geopolitical developments in the neighborhood, India is left with no option react and respond to safeguard in terms of giving legitimacy to the Taliban. The alliance may risk India's genuine humanitarian and developmental interest in Afghanistan. New Delhi has spent around $3 billion in Afghanistan. And you know that how the cross-border development projects are extremely important. But the point is that, above all, it seems Pakistan, as it occupies the strategic depth with the Taliban-led Afghanistan working hand in hand, may unleash the Taliban and other factions like Jaish Muhammad and Lashkar-e-Toiba to trigger tension in India. Terrorism and jihadism may secure some form of vitality. The Taliban, Haqqani, IS and China may plan a cumulative targeting against India. Beijing will play the real game of its choosing. So an axis formation between Pakistan, China, and Taliban is being witnessed. How about if this is the possible geopolitical trajectory in South Asia? India must shift its diplomatic gear and move towards formation of coalition or partnership with nations whose interests are at risk with the rise of Taliban. I have formulated certain it's my personal views in the context of formulating some opinions vis-a-vis the Afghan dilemma. First, I think India should strengthen its ties with the Gulf region. We know that the Abraham Accord, signed on 13 August 2020 between US, Israel, and United Arab Emirates, explains the paradigm shift in Gulf politics. UAE and Saudi Arabia on a different mission to build up the knowledge economies. They seem to have gone silent over the developments in Kabul. They occupied in image crafting as the favorite destinations in the Gulf region for global investment and Western sympathy for the diversification of the economies. They're quite aware of the fact that the sympathy for the Taliban may ruin their image as terror sympathizers. So United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia demonstrate the liberal posturing through Expo 2020 in Dubai and inaugurating the construction of the first cognizant city of the world that's new. And India has vast software potentialities and huge diaspora that will strengthen the position of New Delhi to work on many fronts with the GCC members like Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar as well. Secondly, India should reinforce its bilateral ties with Iran and Central Asian republics to contain the Islamic radicalism in the region. Chabahar is the link to India's Central Asia and gateway to international North-South corridor. Again, India and Israel should identify the common challenges and strengthen counter-terrorism ties to deal with any kind of Islamic radicalism emerging from the region. India should channelize its efforts to promote the objectives of the Quad and also simultaneously try to promote the Build Back and Better World sponsored by G7 as an alternative to BRI, that is Belt and Road Initiative, and China's hegemonic doctrine. Then India and other regional groupings like United, European Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, South Asian Regional Cooperation, and ASEAN may identify the strategic challenges that may emerge from Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISK, and move ahead with common objectives to meet such challenges. Coming to the last but not the least, what I find, at the present moment, we are witnessing a post-hegemonic international structure. And this post-hegemonic international structure may be revamped. China's perceived Tianjia paradigm that everything on the Chinese sovereign in the form of China-Pakistan economic corridor, China-Myanmar economic corridor, China-Central Asian economic corridor, they could be contested by creating alternative, pluralistic, and democratic models. At the present moment, the global institutions like World Trade Organization, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and World Health Organization, they may be restructured to bring equity and inclusive world order to fill the Kindle-Gwargal trough. There's a vacuum in the post-hegemonic international structure. And Taliban problem is the tip of the iceberg. There could be many challenges which may emanate from ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, Islamic State of Khorasan, Al-Qaeda, because they believe the establishment of a caliphate, global caliphate world order. So it is a tip of the iceberg. So India has its past software potentialities and could take the lead in this direction to contain those serious threats posing challenge to the post-hegemonic international system. So we have a lot of alternatives at the present moment, whether to how to lead and face the challenges of Afghan crisis. Because when we are witnessing a flux in the international system, are we trapped in a series of conflict between the declining power that is United America or a hegemonic rising power like China? Is there a real vacuum? So all the regional powers like Turkey, Iran, India, China, they're trying to enter in this game. But unfortunately, the game played by China is highly dominant and hegemonic in character, as it happened in case of Hambantota, in case of Djibouti, in case of Kenya, in case of Islamic banking system in West Asia, in case of Iran. You see, these are all challenges to the existence of the new international system. So Taliban crisis is just a tip of the iceberg. There are many such challenges may emanate from the region, as Professor Samuel Huntington has discussed about it. Okay, so okay, no problem. So we can have a discussion or discuss in the future. I think there's lack of time. Okay, thanks, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Patnaik, because you could able to somehow due to our reminder could able to bring an end to your talk on time. Thank you for that, and thank you for your very insightful and very informative presentation. And you have rightly pointed out, hinted at the vacuum that has been created once America left the Afghanistan. And also you have discussed how it has affected or it is going to affect the countries like from India to Turkey to Iran to China, Russia, like this. So also you have also given some suggestions how India should engage with the countries in the Gulf and so in other international organizations like SARC, ASEAN, like this. So thank you for your presentation. And the next presenter is my good friend, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. Just only 15 days back, I was participating in his seminar as a speaker. And here, let me introduce to the audience Dr. Pramod Jaiswal is, he's having Indian links, and he holds a master's, MPhil, and PhD degree from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and he has authored, edited, and co-edited around dozens of books on China and South Asian affairs. He's a research director at Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, NICE. We may call it NICE, Nepal. So he specializes on China and South Asia and has done extensive work on Chinese foreign policy, China's South Asia policy, and China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. He's a visiting fellow at Sandia National Laboratories Cooperative Monitoring Center, New Mexico, US, and senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, New Delhi. Previously, he was working with Manohar Parikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, known as IDSA earlier. With this brief introduction, I now invite Dr. Jaiswal to have his talk on this conundrum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank Fakir Mohan University, especially my senior, Professor Anil Kumar Mohapatra and Dr. Ramakrishna Pradhan for this kind invitation. I'm not expert on Taliban, but since it's happening, what is happening around the world, it has occupied major space around the world, and so is in Nepal. That's why Taliban Conundrum, India's Afghan dilemma. The theme of today's webinar is significant as it is going to have a huge impact in the whole region. Nepal and India have open border, and due to open border, whatever happens in Nepal is like taking place in India, and whatever is taking place in India is like taking place in Nepal. So what I mean to say is that there are direct implications. Whatever the implication of Taliban is going to be on Nepal will also have on India, and what is happening on India will have on Nepal as well. During my presentation, I would like to focus on the implication of Taliban in Nepal as well as on the whole region, as many of the speakers today and just before me, the very senior professor and my senior Professor Jagati Patnaik has comprehensive discussion on it. So I'll be trying to touch upon some aspects on what will be the implication on Nepal as well as India. I'm sure whatever I discussed, whatever the implication on Nepal will be, will have two countries. Therefore, let me start with just major issues that the issue has already started showing some effect here in Nepal. Like at the moment, we have 20,000 refugees from 10 countries, and we are going to expect that there will be another huge influx of refugees in Nepal as well in days to come. Similarly, there are 10,000 Nepalese working in Afghanistan, and most of them are in the security sector. Since there are a huge number of Nepali working in the security sector, there are risks and fear among the people and the nation, as there are chances that they might be targeted as they worked for the previous government. So Taliban might target on those people who has been serving the previous government. Hence, the government of Nepal should get everyone back safely and ensure their safety. There are also risk of Afghani refugees, as I said, flooding into Nepal and India in days to come. It is going to invite socio-economic problems as well as a threat to national security. If Taliban is not contained, hence the current strategic environment in Southern Asia is full of challenges. The United States has now turned its back on Afghanistan in South Asia and many other global engagement as well. The US is probably going to be more inward looking in the foreseeable future. As a result, there will be no great power that can contain Taliban. The return of Taliban spells disaster for Afghanistan. It is in for a humanitarian crisis, a huge economic crisis, and at the same time, the instability in Afghanistan that threatens the intensification of terrorist activities throughout the region, not only in Afghanistan. As I mentioned earlier, the Taliban has shattered transnational terrorists in the past. Afghanistan's immediate neighbor China, Iran, Pakistan, Central Asia, and a near neighbor India are all concerned that Taliban's inspired violence could spill over on their respective provinces. The fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban carries enormous consequences for South Asia and beyond. Destabilizing could start from there, with Afghanistan once again becoming a safe haven for extremists working in their counterpart across the border in Pakistan. Similarly, developments in Afghanistan could intensify shift and balance of power and deepen the rivalry between US and China, the two emerging competing powers. There are fear the Taliban in Kabul could embolden hardline jihadist group, Islamic radicalization, and terrorism in the neighboring and the region. Similarly, cross-border terrorism and subversions could increase as John Allen, a former commander of United States and the allied force in Afghanistan, anticipate Al-Qaeda's operating from Hindu Kush region with US force has gone. Similarly, Foreign Affairs analyst Guyton Rachel writes, the Taliban's defeat of the US will be a boost on jihadi Europe. Taliban stand for guidance and inspiration. Similarly, UN reports indicate that the Taliban retained extensive ties with Al-Qaeda, which was present in 15 Afghan provinces. Some of them are hiding in federally administered tribal areas, FATA, of Pakistan, and autonomous area bordering Afghanistan. Similarly, reports also indicate the likelihood of them operating through together along Pakistan-Afghanistan border, turning into battlefield. Let me briefly talk on Nepal. Nepal stands on the cusp of the severe strategic challenge amongst Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. For decades, Pakistan's ISI has been found using Nepal as a safe haven to carry out terror attack, run espionage operations, and pump fake currency into India. While the nexus between ISI and Afghanistan, Taliban in the context of Nepal goes back to the hijack of Nepalese Indian Airlines IC-184 by the ISI group, terror group in 1990 from Kathmandu airport, Nepal has hardly paid attention to such concerns. In its 2019 counter report on terrorism, the US reported that due to the open border with India and insufficient security protocol at the country's in Kathmandu, Nepal could be used as a transit or a stagnant point for international terrorism. In 2018, the US had categorically mentioned Indian Mujahideen operating in Nepal. On the other hand, Nepal has poor counter-insurgency infrastructure, and in that case, the significant terror scenarios might take place. So I think these are the major issues that we have to take care in coming days. There will be more. I'd like to address more in the question and answer round. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jawar, giving more time to the audience and to the other speakers by concluding your talk before time. This is why your organization is nice. And during your talk, you have rightly pointed out how does it affect a country like Nepal, and you have rightly pointed out the Kandahar issue, where in 1999 the Indian Airlines aircraft was hijacked to Kandahar. Anyway, so thank you very much, Dr. Jaiswal. And it is always said that the bearer knows branches. So it is frightening to listen from a person who is an Afghani, who belongs to Afghanistan. So we have amongst us Mr. Javed Ahor. He is from Afghanistan. He is a Persian from Afghanistan. He has completed his undergraduate studies from Kabul University in Law and Political Science. He obtained his first master's degree from OSCE Academy in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan in politics and security in Central Asia. He has obtained his second master's degree, advanced LLM in European and International Human Rights Law from Leiden University, Netherlands in 2015. And in 2018, completed his third master degree, research master in Utrecht University in Netherlands. Currently, he is pursuing his PhD in Eurasian Studies, an inter-university PhD program between Humboldt University in Berlin, Germany, and Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. So I am opening the floor to this budding scholar on international relations. Thank you. Please take the floor, Ahor.
Thank you very much, Doctor, and my distinguished guests, and if I may call all of you our regional friends. I am deeply honored to be part of this webinar. I know it's important at this time to discuss it. So without further ado, I would like to allocate my time to discuss matters. First of all, how the government and how things after the Taliban's takeover of Kabul unfolded. First of all, let's take time and discuss what happened, how Taliban took over so rapidly everything in Afghanistan, and how the government fell. It's an important question. It's important to have discuss this matter in more detail. Well, I think most of our panelists and dear distinguished professors and researchers, which I listened to in the previous sessions as well, discussed certain factors affecting the rapid fall of the government. I would like to hear, draw your attention to the couple of factors which contributed to the fall of the Ashraf Ghani's government. First of all, I think Afghanistan, since its inception, its modern history, since independence, have never enjoyed good relation with the tribal belts of the country, especially with the south and north, the south and east. Tribal politics is a barrier to state building in Afghanistan. Because it divides loyalty between the state and tribe. And whenever government try to push for certain reformations, tribal politics have played against the establishment to weaken the state. What happened recently in Afghanistan was that part of the military gave up fighting because the Taliban could penetrate into the military and deceive certain factors in certain figures in the military through their tribal politics. Especially what happened in Herat was absolutely the play of tribal politics, since both the person who was involved in giving up the war were from the same tribe called Alizai, based in Herat. And so the Taliban, as I'm aware of the local context, the Taliban 2 nights before the fall of Herat negotiated with the leader of the Alizai tribe and convinced him that it is good to kind of convince the Tajik leader of the Herat, Amir Ismail Khan, not to continue fighting against the Taliban. Since Amir Ismail Khan was not convinced, they kind of surrendered him in a conspiracy to the Taliban, so that the fight in Iraq will end up to the favor of the Taliban. So what happened there was not a military defeat, but a political defeat to the anti-Taliban front. And that happened similarly in Balkh province as well. The person who was involved in the discussion with the Taliban and the reason the Taliban made it so successfully in Balkh was a person from the military called Zabiullah Muhammad, Pashtun, who was connected with the who was connected with the Taliban much long ago. He was once accused by the defense minister for selling weapons to the Taliban, and that person literally didn't fight even for a day, and he was responsible to deceive the northern figure, Marshal Dostum and General Atta Muhammad Noor. So that's part of the power politics which the Taliban played so successfully in convincing certain military figures and anti-Taliban militias to give up war, and so this is one factor. Another one was corruption. You know, the Pakistani government was very aware of the corruption which was screaming in the government, especially Ashraf Ghani's government was becoming more and more unaccountable, more and more corrupt by every passing day. So the connection between public and the state was getting weaker, and Ashraf was answering to the media, was not most of his cabinet members were rejected by the parliament. They continued working in the office without being to the parliamentarians and to the law, and breaking constitutions and breaching constitution, and which in first place Ashraf Ghani promised to stand for. So the media and the opposition were screaming about the first column, the people in the government who are contributing, who are helping the Taliban to commit suicide attacks in Kabul and other cities.